Traveling to Consciousness, exploring spiritual journeys to find answers in uncertainty.
What is up, conscious monkeys? Welcome back to another episode of Traveling to Consciousness. As always, I'm your host, Clayton Cuteri. And in today's podcast, we're going to talk about something that's actually kind of been irritating me a little bit. I'm going to be honest, it has been irritating me a little bit. It's honestly like a perspective change, I think. Because there's a lot of wars that are going on in our society. A lot of cultural wars. I mean, we have the physical wars, right, between nations, Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Palestine. There's more in Africa and the Middle East that are very rarely reported on. But we also have a war of the sexes between man and women. We have a war going on between within gender ideology of this gender, that gender. We have it between races. Asians versus whites, whites versus blacks, blacks versus Asians. We have it everywhere. Everywhere. We are constantly being bombarded by messaging that it's blacks on whites. It's just all these wars. It's a tremendous amount of wars, and it's honestly quite impossible for our minds to keep all of them straight. And almost none talk about the actual war that is occurring. The actual war that is being played out on the world stage. The most important war that nobody is talking about. Very few people. I'm sure there are people out there, but almost nobody is talking about. Is the war between the elites and the common man. The elites have everything. When devastation hits, when COVID hits, they got the money. They took our U.S. taxpayer dollars and it went to them, went to big pharma, went to government, the politicians, the crooked ones. When natural disaster happened, completely wiped out all of us. But no money came. None of my taxpayer dollars, my federally funded taxpayer dollars. That's like one of the only things that I'm like, okay, you know what? That's a good reason to have federal tax, income tax. Would be for that money to go to the citizens of North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina. I don't know all the states kind of that got hit by it, but essentially all the states in that area. And yet, virtually nil. Okay, some money went, but for all case and points, they might as well have just given them all $0. Because the devastation that plagued them, people who don't have homeowners insurance, or not homeowners insurance, but flood insurance, hurricane insurance, because hurricanes aren't supposed to come that high. Look into HAARP, by the way, HAARP. That's a fun rabbit hole. None of our taxpayer dollars went to those people. And instead, we're sending it to fund other wars. And we're creating new wars. Interwars. Wars within our own culture. And it drives me insane that we can't let's just put those to the side and focus on the elite against the common man. That war. The war that they do not want us to be focused on. And maybe that sounds like some crackpot conspiracy, but it's legitimate. How do I know it's legitimate? 2009, the Tea Party movement. Republicans got fed up with the fact that the elite were not being held accountable. That our taxpayer dollars were not being used to represent us, our will. Haven't heard about them lately. 2011, the left had their same thing called Occupy Wall Street, and it was all about how the 1% against the 99%, and how we were not being treated fairly. How the rich kept getting richer and the poor kept getting poorer with every single thing that was being done. What happened to those movements? Two of the elite versus the common man. First the right had it, then the left. And it might be the most centralist point possible, which is why both sides are completely agreed on it. And yet since 2011, we have had no conversation about it. That was 13 years ago. And you think within those 13 years that the differentiation between the ultra wealthy and the common man, I think we all know it's grown. So why are we not talking about that war? Why are we not talking about this war? This is the war we must all be focused on. Do not get distracted by race, by religion, by your ethnic background, by where your sex, by your gender, by wherever we drew these imaginary lines and said, if you're on that side, you're this person. Or if you're on this side, you're that person. No more. Just stop. Stop feeding into it. Every time you have a discussion about it, it feeds into that system. It feeds into that ideology. It feeds into this idea that those are the most important wars to talk about, and they are not. The most important wars for you and I to be discussing, war is between the elite and the common man. Because we are not being represented in Congress. We are not being represented in the world. The elite, the powerful, the ultra rich, they do not have the best interest of the U.S. citizens at heart. They don't. Let's be real. Look at what's played out. Some say they do, and it's just too much at this point. They don't care. They don't. I'm sorry. Prove me wrong. Send me some sort of data. I'm happy to look at it. But nobody is talking about that war. That war is being waged on the common man everywhere. Somewhere, literally. Look at Palestine. I mean, in Israel too. You know, Hamas has killed Israelis. Israel has killed Palestinians. Ukrainians have killed Russians. Russians have killed Ukrainians. I don't see any elites being killed. Why is it always common men that are killed? The elites have convinced us to go after our brothers and sisters, to go after each other. Whether it's on the basis of race, whether it's the basis of which country you're born in, whether it's basis of religion, whatever it is, that your sex, your gender. These wars are illusions. In reality, we are being pitted against each other. Because the ruling elite do not want you to have this conversation. If you just stop talking about all the other ones and focus on this one, all of those else will get solved. I promise you, they will all be solved. Because you will no longer be under an illusion that they have created for you. Let me say that again. If you start focusing on the war between the elites and the common man, you will no longer be under the illusion of any of the other wars that they have created for you. You will finally see the biggest war of all. The war that they do not want you to see. And just by us looking at this war, examining it, thinking about it, talking about it, is how we start our progress in change, how we get change done, real change, not just like fake imaginary change, but like upgraded change, one where our system becomes upgraded. Oh, it's the patriarchy. Oh, it's men's fault. Oh no, it's women's fault. Oh, feminist this, manosphere this. Stop. Bring it back to the basics. There is a class of ruling elites that want to keep the common man suppressed. This is the conversation for all of us to have. And almost nobody is having it. Not seriously anyhow. And there's a very deep, serious conversation to be had here. But it is not being had. It is not being discussed. So see this podcast as a beacon for you to start having this conversation. Share this podcast so that more people will start having this conversation. Because this conversation is very important. So you have to share it. You have to share this conversation and tell people that we need to be focusing on why the common man is suffering. Why is it that the elites are never suffering? Why is it that the elites become more rich? Why is it that the common man always becomes more poor? This is why you have to share this podcast. The elites will brainwash you into thinking that there are other wars that are more important. And it is psychological drama to keep you trapped in this torturous matrix. More people must be awake to this. You must be awake to this. You must understand that it is the elites versus the common man that is the problem. You must share this podcast because if you do not share this podcast, then no one else is going to have this conversation. We have to make this a grassroots movement where we start talking about the elite versus the common man again. It has been since 2011 that we have had this conversation at a serious level. And it's time. It's absolutely time for this conversation. So with that being said, share this podcast. Talk about this with people. We have to break free. It's the only way to freedom and peace on earth. The common man has to rule again, has to be in charge. Because elites and a ruling class will never bring that safety, will never bring that security, will never bring peace to earth. Because it does not benefit them. It does not benefit the way that they see the world. So I tell you once more, it's the elites versus the common man. And you must share this podcast. For if you don't share this podcast, we are going to have a conversation about it whenever I see you in the 6th dimension.